Hi, my name is Joe Jackson. I'm a journalist, author, interviewer, broadcaster, and documentarian. But as a backdrop to this podcast, let me take you back to 1973 when I was just a kid at school. One day, a fellow student handed me a cassette tape he'd recorded for me and said, "I know you like Leonard Cohen and Scott Walker, so I think you like this. It's an LP called Mythical Kings and Iguanas by Dory Previn." I recognized her name because Dory wrote a song I loved as recorded by Scott Walker and that I, as a budding writer, saw as one of my anthems. You're Gonna Hear From Me. But how could I have known that this LP and this introduction to Dory would change my life? Or that later in life she'd become my friend, mentor as a writer, and include me in a fragment of memoir she wrote and read to me. Yet given that one lesson I learned from Dory as a writer is that the deeper I reach inside myself to tell a story, the more people are likely to relate to it. Let me give you a deeper backstory to why Dory and I connected at a soul level the moment I heard her sing her songs. 6 months earlier, my dad had gone through what I described in my diary as that bastard treatment called ECT, namely electroconvulsive therapy, or electric shock treatment as it's more commonly known. And at one point I said to my beloved mother, Phyllis Jackson, who until the day she died in 2013 insisted that ECT tore our family apart, "Mom, it seems that whatever demons ECT awakened in Daddy's psyche, he's trying to project into mine." However, it was precisely at this time I discovered that I could at least try to discharge those demons by writing poetry. And this new reality in my home life, which was darker than anything I'd ever known or even read about, helped me tune into the plays of Tennessee Williams and the movies of Ingmar Bergman. Dory Previn, I recognized immediately, was operating from a similar artistic space. I'd found another voice that spoke not just to me, but for me, and better still, she was a woman. I had a girlfriend I loved and was loyal to, but when Dory sang in The Lady with the Braid the line, "Would you care to stay till sunrise?" I instinctively thought, yes, though I had in my mind no image of who this woman was. And when she sang in Going Home, "Isn't going home a long and lonely ride?" I may even have said aloud in my bedroom, yes, I definitely did cry. Finally, in this longer than usual podcast preface, my dad was a lifelong Sinatra fan, and inside the lid of his hi-fi cabinet he had many pictures of the man, one of Frank and Mia Farrow. Dad certainly seemed impressed that a man of 50 would marry a young woman of 20 or so. Although that said, he was not impressed back in the early 60s when my mother got her hair cropped short Mia Farrow style. But that night in 1973, when I first heard Dory sing Lemon-Haired Ladies, I didn't know it was about Farrow, or that on her first LP, which I'd soon buy, Dory's song "Beware of Young Girls" was a veiled attack on Mia Farrow, who had an affair with Dory's husband Andre. Either way, in 1986, after I interviewed Dory for the first time, she read what she described as a psychosexual study I'd written about Sinatra and said she hoped that someday I'd write something similar about her. By 1998, when we did in her home the interview you're about to hear, I was intending to write that, and with her blessing, a one-woman show based on Dory's life and work. Sadly, none of that came to pass. But if anyone out there wants to make with me a documentary about Dory, and perhaps her links to Ireland and her being what she described to me as fundamentally Irish, get in touch. What follows is just a tiny clip from 20 hours of taped interviews. Although, that said, these tapes are copyright and must not be used without my permission. Enjoy.
I always sensed that I would be left in that marriage, that I wasn't good enough. Going back to the Irish and he spoke 4 languages and I spoke nothing, and all those things, and it was all, I always felt that I would be left.
But anyone who could listen to that and also must be realistic about the fact that a person who can write a song like Valley of the Dolls theme and depict that kind of fragmentation of self must have been hell to live with.
Terrible.
You know what I mean?
You know,
so you have to go, whoever the other party is, it must have been you know, they had to deal with other demons on top of the demons they were trying to dance with in you. You know what I mean? It was like...
We were together just a bit less than 13 years, and I do not know how long, how he stood it that long. It's a tribute to him that he stayed that long. And people have said since that he must have loved me to stay that long. You know, who knows? I don't know. He did love me in the beginning. But there was something there. And to this day, I mean, we've become friends again. Yeah. We wrote a piece together for last spring for Lincoln Center, and we always keep coming back together, you know.
Right.
But and he keeps going to other women and more wives, and I think he's going to start on his 5th now. But that's okay. Look, I've been third. This is my 3rd, you know. But the thing is though that he was. Yes, I don't know how he stood it that long. And because I could separate part of that from myself to say, look how you are acting, look what you're putting him through. People would come to the house and they'd say, where were you? 3 months you were gone. Where do you disappear to?
Right.
And he would never tell them.
Okay.
She's away.
Was it a well-kept secret from everyone? A secret kept from everyone?
Yes.
All right.
And if I remember I was at a dinner party one night, and I happened to be sitting next to Mike Nichols, and he saw something in my lyrics. He knew something. And he said to me, he talked about Valley of the Dolls and Come Live With Me, and there was another one that I wrote, Faraway Part of Town, things like that. And he said, you know, where do you go? I know you don't travel, I know you don't fly, and you disappear for 3 months. And I started to tell him.
Okay.
I'd never told anyone.
Right.
And at the other end of the table, I hear a finger snap, and Dory, and I look down, and Andre goes, shh.
Okay.
Puts the finger up, don't say.
Don't tell.
Yeah, don't tell.
That's very Irish too, isn't it? Don't tell.
Don't tell. And he was Jewish. He was more Irish than me in that way. Don't tell the neighbors.
Don't tell.
That's what my parents said. And they stopped speaking to me after they heard my songs because I told the neighbors. I spilled the beans.
You did. You put the washing out in the line. All those things.
Don't tell the neighbors. I have in my play, I say to him, you know, you can't stay and I can't go. That's the dichotomy between us. And I knew, and I got to the point, Joe, where I said to myself, he won't leave me. And I've done everything to make him leave because I want to be alone with my pills. I can't stand this any longer. So the only thing, and I don't want him to leave me, and I really, you know how all those things go back and forth. Yeah. And so I thought the only thing I'm going to have to do is kill myself because he won't go. You know, and he left.
He left before you tried to kill yourself.
Yes.
But you've said that line in your book, or you said it to me about the person who leaves is not always the person. You know that idea. You had left him before then. You'd gone to the faraway part of town.
For another reality. Yeah. I was in an altered state. I had gone to the faraway part of town. Yes.
Hadn't you?
Yes.
You know? But what is I last night when I heard you listening to my show, I hope I didn't misread it when I said...
You heard me listening?
No, when I watched you listening to my show. And I talked about you, right? And the part where I had remembered, I hope I remembered correctly, and I hoped if I got it wrong you would correct me after the show. But where I said that, you know, you saw these images of him with Mia in papers, you found out that way about the relationship, and she was pregnant. Had I heard you tell me that story right that way? That when she became pregnant you were reminded of your inability to have child and your abortion, and this just steamrolled the next breakdown. I don't know. That's my memory of when we talked before, but I hope I didn't.
Okay, here is the situation. Is this going on too long?
Yeah. No, it's not. No, don't worry about time.
I heard about the affair on the most horrendous 20th century way. I saw it on the news.
Oh, okay.
Under Hollywood.
On the telly?
On the telly. On the telly, we say TV.
Okay.
And I was home, I had talked to him that morning, and I was sitting watching the news, and a Hollywood reporter named Rona Barrett announced that Mia Farrow was with him in Houston. And I couldn't believe it. I had talked to him that morning, and he was, and so I called him that night, And he said, no, don't be silly. No, it's not, it's not true. That's how I learned about that. I learned about the pregnancy because a woman from the LA Times called and said, Mrs. Previn, Mia Farrow is pregnant, and could I come over and have drinks with you and talk about it? And I said, I don't know anything about anybody being pregnant.
Right.
And if I did, I wouldn't have drinks with you or anybody in the world. And I don't want to say anything about this. And I hung up. The woman then blackballed me in the paper.
All right.
Because of
that response.
Yes. Right. And so my point that I'm trying to say about that is that not that because of the abortion or that I couldn't have children, but that there was a way of getting a man, another woman's husband, and or keeping the man by making a baby.
Okay.
And that distressed me because it was something to which I would not and could not, because of my mental state, resort to.
Okay.
Does it?
All right. Yes, it does. It makes absolute sense. Because then you get the images from your songs of she admired our unmade bed.
That's right.
And all those resonance, then it comes true. If that was the devious plan, this is where it manifested itself.
Oh, I knew it. I could see it in retrospect, the entire plan. Yes.
The way the whole thing had unfolded in that way.
Absolutely.
Right.
I was lying in bed with the flu, and he went into the kitchen to get coffee or something like that. And on it came, it was Christmas, and I hadn't gone with him to this party at John Foreman's Christmas party, and I see him with her, with like arms linked, one arm and the other arm around her thing. And it was like Ingrid Bergman in Gaslight. I said, and it came back in, and I said, you're on the TV, and they turned it off. They went to something else. He said, what are you talking about? I said, at John Foreman's party, I was supposed to go with you, and you were there with her. What are you talking about? I wasn't there with her.
All right.
And I said, what? But they took your picture, the two of you. He said, well, because we were both well known, and But don't you understand? Can't you understand? He was trying to protect me in a strange way. He wanted to, because he was afraid that I would break down, that I would go crazy. I mean, I was a bomb waiting to go off all the time into another reality. And this man had lived with that all through those 13 years. And then when finally he decided, he knew he was going to leave, but it was just a question of how to break it to me without making me break again.
Was it also a question of it didn't matter who the woman was at that point, that he had decided to just go in that direction?
Didn't matter to who?
To him.
No, I think that
was part of the propelling feature fact.
When she decided she wanted Sinatra, she got Sinatra, and when she decided she wanted Andre, she was passing through on her way to Mexico with Polanski and his then wife, who was murdered,
Sharon Tate,
who was in Valley of the Dolls.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
It's all so connected.
Yeah.
And they stopped off. And Polanski and Sharon Tate, knowing Andre from Valley of the Dolls, they were going to have dinner together.
Okay.
There was Mia with them. She had come along. They then went to the airport, and she said, I'm not going to the festival. And they said, why not? And she said, I want to go back and see Andre.
So she identified immediately.
And she'd been at our house, and she'd known me, and we'd been friends. And I had told her that I was always afraid that one day, he was very lonely when he traveled, and that one day when I couldn't be with him, like in Houston, like in those places, and that one day somebody would reach out to him and he would take her hand.
Right.
So I gave her all the goods.
Sure, absolutely.
But don't
it's
you
like
see,
24 hours from Houston.
But don't you understand that we do everything subconsciously? I gave the information to her. So if she ran with it, good for her. I gave it to her. So therefore, I am just as responsible.
Sure. Yeah. You set down the kind of network.
You bet.
That opened up.
You bet.
Do you and she get on?
I've never seen her again.
Since she and Andre went together?
I mean, I've seen her places, but I don't.
Right. So you don't know what her response is to those songs? Like
when she wrote this book, this recent
book.
book.
It's down. I saw it downstairs.
Yeah, she said certain things about. She did not like that song.
Either Lemon-Haired Ladies or Beware of Young Girls.
She said about Beware of Young Girls that the girl was 24 or something like that, and she said I was not 24, and therefore it couldn't have been about her. She was not 24. But the other thing, though, that when she was coming out with this book, she told a friend of mine, whom she knew was a very close friend of mine, twice, that she hoped that I would read the book and that then I would read her side of the story.
All right. Of the love affair.
That's all she said. That I could see her side of it.
See it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. But and what was Andre's response to those songs and to the whole album? Because the man who had told you, shh, he must have done a flip.
He couldn't believe them.
It's like all the shushes have just blown back in your face.
He couldn't believe them. He was astonished. He said, "Where did these come from?" I said, "I wrote some of them while I was living with you."
Every time you said "shh," I wrote it down.
Writing down. and he said, and you know what? He said to me, "There are at least 5 melodies in that I admire, that I wish I'd written."
This is On My Way to Where?
On My Way to Where.
Right. Okay. Right.
And that was the best thing he could have said to me.
Okay.
I couldn't believe it. And he said, "And where did you learn this? How did this happen? And I didn't know you played guitar. And when were you doing this while we were doing the film songs?" And I said, "No, I just did a few when I was in the funny farm, when I was in the nut bin, because by then I could talk openly and freely. Yeah. I had told the world."
Absolutely.
You know? And I said,
that must have felt great in itself.
Absolutely.
That sense of liberation of the self.
Exactly.
Like all the years I've been told to shut up and go up into the corner.
By my mother and my father. Don't say you were locked in the room. Don't say he hit me. Don't say, hit my mother. Don't say this. Don't say that. Don't say he said you're not his kid. Don't, you know.
Far away part of town, gone.
That's right.
Hi, Joe Jackson here again. I thank you for listening to this edition of the Joe Jackson Interviews podcast, and I shall upload soon onto my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com, some of my articles about Dory.